Good morning, happy Monday. Welcome to Coffee Talk Live. Today we are talking about a sensory diet, and you probably don't even know what that means because my guest and I kind of made it up while we were talking about it. So Coffee Talk Live is the show where we discuss what it means to live a sustainable, healthy lifestyle as mothers, as women, for ourselves, in the home and in the community. What I really love about this show is that if you are in my Strong as a Mother, Happy and Healthy Living group, I encourage you to have a voice in the conversation. So in real time, write a comment, tell us good morning where you're listening in from, or even if you're watching the replay, please share your thoughts, experiences, and opinions. We want this to be a communal conversation. So I'm Connie Pastorius, host of the show and showrunner in the Happy and Healthy Living group. I'm also an online health and fitness coach for busy moms who are looking to get stronger and gain energy. If you're watching on YouTube later, please hit the subscribe button because we have just more and more awesome content coming your way so you can get notified and stay in the know. So let's get right to it because we have a lot of really cool stuff to talk about today. My guest is my cousin. She has been on the show before and just a brilliant, brilliant woman. I feel like she is pioneering, and I'm not understating this, neurodivergence and behavioral modification. I'm really excited to continue, and I'm going to stutter because she knows this way more than I do. But my cousin Emily is a licensed social worker with specialties in neurodivergence and trauma, and has been in this health field for 15 years, which probably feels like a lifetime. So please welcome to the show, Emily. Good morning, cuz. Unmute, my friend. I want to hear you talk.
Okay, there we go. Good morning.
Good morning. So I successfully stumbled through your introduction. So I'm sorry.
That is totally okay. I only have like one piece that I want to throw out there is like sensory diet is definitely something that like we've had a lot of conversations about, but it also, it was really pioneered, like, and even just some of the wording of like sensory diet and things like that were pioneered through helping children like identified with autism and ADHD and working with them even through like education type environments. But now we're realizing like how much it really links back to somatic coping in regards to mental health and regulation and things like that. So I just wanted to like throw that out there that like I cannot take credit for like naming that or anything like that, but it is something that I love, and I love the applications of.
Okay, good. So we didn't make that up, but what you are saying, if I'm understanding correctly, is that this is something that originally was discussed and applied for ADHD, ASD as well.
Yeah. Yep.
But now we're starting to see the applications helping a lot in just general pop mental health situations.
Right. And it's kind of weird because I've just started incorporating it with lots of people, including neurotypical people that are just dealing with trauma pieces. A lot of people are going to recognize like the title of the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I have to also say that like that was not the first book written about somatic responses. There was also, I'm totally going to like flounder her name, so I'm going to have to go back and Google it. But there was a woman that actually pioneered the research probably almost a decade before the man who got credit for a lot of the work in regards. So I have to like just plug that, and I'll have to look up her name later and tell you that. But somatic coping has been a big part of trying to manage like trauma response, crisis response, things like that. But then when I also started looking at specialties and like neurodivergence, realizing how much of this like overlaps, and just really, we don't spend enough time talking about like how much information we intake through senses.
Right. And, you and I have had multiple discussions on this because as a coach, as a fitness coach, and starting to see people trying to stick to their exercise program and manage their health and, apply the nutritional guidelines that we talk about, how much harder it is right now after the pandemic. There's like a before where you could like really buckle down and just get through it and work on it. But now women are, at least my clients are having such a hard time sticking to a program, even though it was like hard in the first place. So yeah, though we're understanding. And so we want to like share this clearly, like this is not like a food. This is not, we're not talking diet in the term of the food that you consume, right? I don't even like using the word because it has so many meanings, but I love the idea within the scope of identifying and addressing certain aspects of your senses. So I think you mentioned before we got on here that we are going to go through the 5 senses and kind of discuss what over and under stimulation means in each of those and how we can take small steps towards feeling a little bit more even keeled.
Yeah, I think one of the things that like we really have lost is the more we've gotten separated from just like being connected to our bodies and like understanding what's going on with our bodies, the more we've become separated from that, the harder it is for us to be emotionally regulated, the harder it is for us to even understand the implications of what our environment does to us. And I think sometimes like we also get this like tough it out mentality of like, we just don't have a choice but to move forward in this way. And I think that's one thing that the pandemic has kind of like confronted head on was like, oh no, we actually do have some choices. But yeah, I think like starting with even just the sensory diet has nothing to do with food per se, though we do talk about like textures and things like that, especially for neurodivergent people. So if you've got like a kiddo that won't eat anything but chicken nuggets and tater tots, it could be because they're having some sensory issues with textures and things like that. And so we just kind of go through like all 5 senses in relation to like how we're moving through our environment and how our environment is shaping our own regulation and how that can really be very detrimental. So when we think about a lot of moms, like moms I know frequently talk about being just like touched out or like talked out. And having 2 like younger kids that also like never stop asking questions. Like it gets to a certain point in the afternoon when I'm on like question 236 that they're like, mom, and this, and like I find myself starting to get irritated with them and like frustrated with them, even though they're just being curious and like children. But I'm just like, if y'all talk to me one more time, like if I hear one more word, mom's gonna lose it. Like I can't keep it together. I just need you to be quiet right now. Yeah. And I think like realizing that piece really was kind of a turning point for me because everybody else was getting the absolute best of me. And by the time I was getting home and actually like picking them up from after work and things like that, I was so dysregulated for my day that I couldn't be their regulation. And they need me to be their regulation at this age.
That's a really, really big, that's a really big point that you're making, that like people wondering like why I feel like I'm a bad mom, I'm just yelling at my kids all the time. And it's not necessarily that like you can't tolerate your kids, it's that all of the rest of your life has taken all of your ability to cope and manage and handle those stress levels. It's kind of like when I talk with my clients about decision fatigue and why making a meal plan can be helpful if like you're the kind of person at the end of the day where you're just like standing in the kitchen or staring at your refrigerator and have like no clue what to cook. No clue. You have food, but you're like, I don't even know what to do right now. So you order in. So yeah. Similarly, you're talking about having just a certain level of ability to manage these kinds of, and this is so we're wandering into like auditory overstimulation.
Yeah. Like some auditory pieces, definitely. Like, I feel like auditory is probably one of my worst ones. I think that's maybe why like I gravitate to that one more, is like auditory gets me in a way that like I don't think anything else does. And so like when I'm thinking about like hearing all of the noises throughout the day and like the traffic and the driving, and then there's like music on, and then you have to like, because in your brain you're trying to run through your list of like 112 things and you cannot keep up with all of it. And then every 2 seconds there's a kiddo jumping in like, hey, why do crows look the way that they do? I don't know, dude. Like they just do. Like they just do.
Yeah. And my daughter, even yesterday, I've made the mistake, and I talked with my neighbor about this, about telling her in advance that like, you're going to go play with Lily at, tomorrow morning. So what do I get? Every like 5 minutes at the most, is it time to go over Lily's house yet? Is it time to go over Lily's house yet? And I'm like, I have to stop and be like, they don't understand the concept of time. I need to just deal with this and just let it go until 9:30 when they can actually leave. So from now on, one of my solutions is we're not telling them where they're going until 5 minutes beforehand.
Also, like, give her a watch, show her what the numbers look like, and be like, at this time. But yeah, don't tell her either because she's a little young.
She's young. Okay, so if we're talking about managing auditory stimulation, overstimulation, what are some things that we can do to help regulate us? I like that word, regulate.
Yeah. So I feel like a lot of it starts when I'm at work during the day. And there are some days that I work in office and there are some days that I don't work in office. And obviously, like, wherever you are is going to impact that differently. Like, I've got some privilege in the fact that, like, I work in a pretty quiet space down here. Like, you can tell that, I mean, it's super understimulating in this space for all the right reasons, because I don't want to take on too much to be in this space all day. So the colors are neutral. The lighting is really warm and very low, and like, it's very quiet down here. And part of that is even like when I have kiddos that come in to see me and they're coming in from like their day, usually they're overstimulated too, because so much of our culture and so much of our lives is just around like moving quickly and having to do all the things and catch up with all the things. And so when our kids get home from school or when they're taking a break from school, like, it is a lot. And so one of the things that we even do, like when we get home from school or something, is like we all kind of go to our own corners and we have some time to, like, if my daughter needs to blast her music because she needs that really, like, she needs that intense stimulation. And my son, like, I don't know, certain songs like are not allowed to be played in our house because they just hype him up too much. And then like he can't bring himself back down. So, and like songs I'm even embarrassed about like saying that my 5-year-old listens to. But I think like
this is a judgment-free zone, but
right.
But I understand.
I think like for me, it's interesting because I vacillate between either wanting it to be like quiet or like I have my music blasting. And that's just what regulates me sometimes, is like it lets me get out some of the stress pieces that I had before, just like going through the music. So I would say that like everybody has different auditory needs, but I would also say that like if we're turning into those people that are just thinking through all of those pieces while we're trying to do like our commute or trying to do our other things, then we're kind of missing the point. So we have to be really intentional about like, what am I doing right now? Am I focusing on listening to what's going on with my kids? Am I focusing on listening to what's going on with music? Am I focusing on the intentionality of like silence in my space? Or am I just letting everything hit me with no feedback? And so I think that's what it kind of is it's more almost like sensory, like wall that I can put up with intentions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like sensory headphones almost.
Yeah. And sometimes like that's what we need. Sometimes we need silence. Right.
I even have a client who has those little rings that she puts in her ears that turn like all the decibels down. She's like my kids, shout out to Brianne, good morning. She's like, sometimes I need to just put it in full monitor.
Yeah.
I get that.
And I think there's so much good about that because like, I don't know, if unregulated adults cannot regulate children. Like that's kind of like the basic rule of like all children's therapy and all family therapy is like, if the adult is unregulated emotionally, physically, however, they cannot regulate their kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely read, I've read like one parenting book, maybe aside from like recipe books for kids. And one of the points was like managing tantrums and like heightened emotions. And like if you escalate, then the person that's supposed to be there to help bring them down isn't stable, so they don't have anything to feel like they can like feel grounded with. So like in those like tantrum moments or in those like highly emotional moments, like my job is to be I don't know about like be like a pillar or be that calm place that they can feel like they can like come down. Like, I don't have to give them the solution. I don't have to like talk them through it, but just let them know that like I'm here. And
Yeah,
that's hard. And if you are like wiped out at the end of the day.
right. I think too, like it doesn't mean that we have to be like that perfect person, because I do think that like one of the things that I want to role model for my kids, particularly my daughter, is this fact of it's okay to tell people that you're overstimulated and you need a minute. It doesn't mean that you are like you're disengaging from them or you're ignoring them or anything like that. It means that like I care about you enough to let you know that right now you are not going to get the best of me, but if you give me 5 minutes to bring myself back down, you will get me. And I think that's one piece that like I've really tried to also impart on her, because like it's impossible to always be regulated, or to add that to your list of things as a mom that like, okay, I have to do all of this, but I better be regulated while I'm doing it. And that's just not accurate like portrayal. And I feel like there's already so much pressure on girls and women to do the regulation work for their whole families. And so I want us to be able to also say like, I have too much on my plate right now. I need to take a step back.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that. And I think it's a really good thing to model for them to of all the things that they hear me say and repeat. I think that's a really cool one for them to start understanding the concept of like mom, I'm overstimulated. I need a minute. Like I'm gonna go to my room and whatever. I don't know how it plays out, but okay, so we talked about like auditory. So recognizing like what situation you're in. Do you feel like there's too much noise going on? Do you feel like there's not enough noise going on? And seeing and doing a little trial and error and seeing like for you, what do you need? For your kids, what do they need? I love that like after school idea of like how to bring them down from like all the shiny objects and the high energy stuff. And I want to continue because there's 4 more senses. We could probably have done an entire episode on each sense, but we'll just zoom through these.
Totally. And I guess what I would also say is that like if a family wants to kind of start thinking about this, the easiest way to do it, and I can even send you a PDF, Con, that I usually use with like my families when we're first starting to talk about this type of coping, we just kind of we literally write down all 5 senses and we kind of go through and observe that first week of when are the points that I'm starting to feel myself with that, either that irritability climbing, that anger climbing, that frustration climbing, because those are all signs that we're overstimulated. And then we mark down what's happening for us, like on a sensory level at those moments. On the flip side too, we also have to talk about like when we're understimulated. And so there are times when we start to get bored, or we've seen the same walls for too long and we've been doing the same things for too long. Like, for example, we've been in and out of pandemic lockdowns and things like that for going on 3 years now. And like our kids have even maybe forgotten what life looked like beforehand. Like I've kind of forgotten what life looked like beforehand totally. And so when that happens, we tend to get more like irritable, tired, not feeling motivated, not feeling like I want to make changes because nothing's going to really change. Like we start to get a little bit more hopeless when we're understimulated and we haven't seen enough of that feedback. And so that's a big part of it too. And I think like sensory diet is all about intake and how we're engaging the environment about us and how intentionally like we have to be about what our space feels like. Because like even just from a functioning perspective, like it's hard for us to be regulated when nothing's functioning the way that it's supposed to.
Yeah. I'm clearing my throat too. Excuse me. This is the cup you made me.
Oh, I even forgot that I made that cup.
I did not. No, yeah. So I think this is a great segue into the next sense, because I have talked to my clients about, and I guess I was doing this like sensory adjustment without even understanding what I was saying. But I said like, if you feel like don't feel like doing your workout, right? Sitting comfy, everything's quiet. You're like, do I have to get up? What I usually recommend is like, kind of get into an entire environment and not just a routine, but like put on your workout clothes, put on really loud music or put your headphones on. Like, what do you, whenever you go to the gym, there's like music playing and everybody's got, their workout stuff on, and it's like a whole vibe. So if you're stuck at home and you, how can you recreate that? So you actually have that feeling like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my workout in. So we talked, a little bit about the music part, but now I wandered into like physical touch, and that means a couple different things. So, fire away.
Right. So like I think about a lot of moms are touched out just from how much we get physical touch from our kids. But then like also I think like even when we're around other people, like women are kind of almost expected to be more like touchy-feely than our male counterparts are. But then add in like our clothing selection and things like that. So like I will unashamedly say that at certain parts of my career, like I rocked 4-inch heels every day and like dressed up every single day, like to an intense point. And then like, but also like over the day, by the time I got home, like I couldn't wait to get out of my heels and out of my dress clothes and into comfortable clothes and things like that. And so even just that was enough to like take more energy out of me than it should have. And so now being really smart about like, okay, I got to wear things that I'm not going to feel uncomfortable in. I got to wear things that I'm going to feel like I can move around and do what I want to be doing in all day. Basically, I don't want to take on any more like sensory triggers than I need to, so that I actually have energy to divert to other places. Because you figure every single sensory piece that we take in, like we are still like creatures of like our environment. And so when we take in all of that information all day, even though it's coming to us like subconsciously, it's still a lot of information to process. And so like you think about some of these kiddos that have like sensory processing pieces and things like that, or are neurodivergent people. And I have to say, like, I also am very neurodivergent. So it's not like I'm just one of the people that's like, oh, you should do this. I hate it when people tell ADHD people to get calendars and stuff. Like, do you know how many calendars I have? I have so many planners. I don't use them. They're pretty, but I don't use them. And so like finding things that actually really function for us. And I think that's what I like about sensory diet is that like, because it's so specific to the one person and how they intake things, like what's going to be comfortable to you is not going to be what's comfortable to me. And I kind of always laughed, even just like when you and I are together and like we go out, we could not dress more differently. We could not look more differently, but we both do it in a way that's like comfortable for us,
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned before in a different conversation that I wanted you to bring up is like clothing selection within like tags and how your kids might be affected by like the clothing that they wear and the kind of the different brands that have been starting to address this that you're a big fan of.
Yeah, we actually even over this weekend moved to, I will call this neurodivergent clothing functioning pieces. I don't even know what, and I can't even take credit for the idea. It was my partner's idea of, instead of us like going through the pain of like folding everything and putting them into dressers, like now we just have like a different bin for every type of clothing, like a bin for tops, a bin for bottoms, and like those type of things, which cut back on a lot of stress and we can see all of our clothes. But yeah, I think like we have had to do some adjustments, even like for going into school, to make sure, as my older one is going through school now, she has certain clothing pieces that like she'll wear for special occasions, but like if it messes at all with like how she can move during the day, she's not wearing it. And so like girlfriend needs to only wear, like we use compression leggings and she uses like very loose fitting tops, and like that's kind of what she wears every day. We kind of turned it into a uniform because like clothing should be functional for our neurodivergent type brains. It has to be very, very functional. I think that there's a lot of new like spaces that are starting to take some of that into account. Like I honestly, like Target has a whole line of clothing that is not only for kiddos that have like some other types of medical special need pieces, but also just like for our kids that have sensory pieces and no tags, and like picking comfortable materials and things that are going to be helpful for them. But then also like, I know that I am in my late stage of my early adulthood. Like I'm not there anymore. We're middle aged now, which is hard to take. But even in my middle age, like I'm still rocking American Eagle because they've started doing like all of these inclusive parts with their branding and like pictures and things that they have. And I just think that's really amazing. And I love following companies that are doing more to like actually have functional clothing instead of just like fast fashion.
Right, right. And it was there was a little space, like when I met my husband, when I met Chris, shortly after he ended up working at American Eagle for a while. And that was like the sweet spot of like low-rise jeans and like fitted hoodies and polo shirts. So I had like really great access to clothing that I really liked. But then they started going a little too hard into the 80s and then a little too hard into the 90s. So it's nice to see that they're like kind of changing their brand image a little bit to be more accommodating.
Yeah, and I feel like the Aerie is that way. Like they have all seamless everything, and like that's amazing.
American Eagle will take our commission check now.
I'll just take jeans.
Just pay us in jeans. So I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, because I think 99% of people I talk to whenever we discuss goals and like what do you want to feel, what do you want to achieve that isn't necessarily scale related, they say that like I want to fit into my old clothes again. And I feel like there's a really important connection there between like the clothes that you felt and wore when you felt a certain way about yourself that isn't vanity. Because I know that there's a lot of like warriors out there in the fitness industry that's like, you shouldn't worry about the clothes or the size that you wear or like wanting to fit into your clothes again. And I'm over here like I just like made a human. And like the little concession that I would like is to have a body back again that like fit into the clothes that I was happy in, that I felt like myself in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess like for me, I also think about like sensory memories, right? Like as somebody that is very sentimental and like has a history of keeping things that like I know I probably will never wear again or things like that. I think that we put a lot of, like when you think about your favorite memories and when you think about all of the things like your most like special experiences, the things that you usually remember are like, what did it feel like? What did it feel like to be in that space? What did it feel like to connect back with that? What did it feel like to experience all of the things? You remember the smells, you remember the way the light was, you remember what you were wearing. And I think like that's one of the big markers of how we do memories, just because like memories and like our senses are so linked to our storage of memories. So then when you think about like how that is correlated to a woman like feeling like, you know what, I didn't lose my entire identity. I didn't lose all of my connection with every single one of those memories because I had this child. You know, it doesn't have to be like an either or. So I think that that's one piece. I don't think it is about vanity. I think sometimes it is, but I think that a lot of it has to do with memory pieces and like remembering what it was like to be able to put on like your favorite pair of jeans and favorite shirt and like run out to go to your favorite restaurant. And now like with trying to change so much of your life, like maybe you don't want to go out to your favorite restaurant because you're trying to like watch what you're eating, or maybe you can't put on your favorite pair of jeans and things because you're still trying to figure out what your body feels like. Now, I will say, like, I think all of us kind of have to, with that sentimentality, like I feel like I may have made that word up, but with my thinking of that, I also just realized too that sometimes we can get too stuck in some of those things. And I think like thinking about it like almost as like the change of time of like, oh, well, this child was born, everything from like before child and after child, you know, like,
Yep.
And I think we think that way. And I don't think that it has to be that way, but I do think that we put a lot of cultural pressure on that. But I do think a lot of it is actually more linked to like memories, even food that we like and food that we enjoy. I mean, like you and I have joked before about like Beddoes Pizza, which is this like hole in the wall pizza place in Pittsburgh that our entire family loves.
That me.
And I will say like 100%, the reason that we all love that pizza is nostalgia, not necessarily because the flavor profile is that amazing, right? So like, I think that things like that, lots of our memories and lots of our happy and negative pieces are attached to our sensory things because that's how our body processes information. And so I don't know, I think that connects back to some of the, if you're going to be paying attention to your body, you have to be paying attention to all five of your senses very intensely, because that's how you're processing every single bit of data that comes in from the world.
Right, right. And I agree that it's like a small piece and there's like a bigger picture to look at. Because what happens a lot too is like when they would recall, when my clients or like potential clients would recall when they, were this size or felt like they had a lot of energy and felt really good in their bodies when they had 2 hours to go to the gym and when they had all these different conditions throughout the day. So they were looking like zeroing in on this one very particular aspect of their life, not realizing that like so many other factors affected that. I bet you felt like you had a lot of energy when you were sleeping 9 hours a night, like consecutively.
Right.
So taking all of the senses and observing how we respond in different situations and just starting to make these like little changes as we observe them. So we talked about auditory, the auditory sense. We talked about the physical sense. What should we go into next?
We could do like, I mean, I think about like taste and I think about smell and I think about like even like sight pieces. I think all of those are really linked. I think with sight, like the biggest piece for me becomes about like light and how much light we have in, but also like I'm a little weird in that way. But I do think like light is a big part of it, especially as we're coming out of this winter and like between, I don't know like where other people landed, but for me, like COVID going into its third year and like the gray of winter and the like cold, just the seasonal affect this year was brutal. And so now that we've had like a couple of like the sunny days coming out and like the blue skies, like it's freakishly weird, but like you can even feel the energy shift like in our clinic here. Like you can be up in the hallway upstairs and we actually our doc popped out into the lobby the other day and I was like, oh, did you need something? She's like, no, I just like feel the energy change. And it was because it was like the first sunny day that we've had. And so like, I think how much time we're spending in environments that like really feed us versus environments that really drain us. Mm-hmm. The other thing too, is that when we are like seeking dopamine and we want some of those like positive feelings and positive interactions, like what we look for, one of the quickest ways to do that sometimes is food, because it's like instantaneous. And it honestly has nothing to do with like feeling full or feeling hungry. It's about wanting a sensory feedback piece that's pleasant, and taste is one of the quickest things that we can get for that. Mm-hmm. And so I think like sometimes when we are maybe not getting those hunger cues, but we are like really seeking that dopamine, that might be one of the reasons that we're looking for like that snack piece. But if we can recognize that it's actually like a sensory input, like we're being understimulated at that point, then we can switch to another sensory component that actually is more efficient and helpful. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually wanted to point that out, that with snacking, right? A lot of people have a problem with snacking and feeling that they just like find themselves wandering into the kitchen or like can't sit down on the couch without a snack in hand. And like this is a common article like in magazines and online that like coaches or writers will say like find something to distract you to like do instead of going to the cupboard. Or I'll talk to my clients about putting the healthiest snacks at eye level, so that's the easiest thing to grab, or to like put fruit or like healthy snacks on the table, so that's the easiest like thing to grab, because like if you're still going to go to something that's at least going to add value, add nutrition to your body. But now we're looking at this on a deeper, more chemical level as to why that's such an important skill or thing to work on in your house, right?
Right.
Yeah. So this dopamine, this need for dopamine, most of it comes, or a lot of it comes from food, right? So where else do we, with like our sight and our smell and our taste, like where else do we feel over or understimulated a lot? And
Yeah.
food.
Yeah. So let me kind of go back a little bit and see if I can explain a little bit like what dopamine really does for us. Because I think a lot of times people think of dopamine as just being like that feel good hormone. Like that's how it's described. I think like in some,
Drug addicts and stuff.
yeah. And I think like even just, I mean, even when we just talk about it, like, I don't know, generally as a public, I think we think of dopamine as like seeking that fun part, but that's not necessarily true. Like dopamine is a regulatory type hormone, like it regulates all these things. And what I mean by that is like when we get ready to go to bed at night, dopamine is what turns on our ability to make melatonin. And in the morning, when we wake up, dopamine is what turns it off and allows for us to keep working on the other pieces that we need to for the day. It regulates our digestive system. It regulates like when we get hunger cues, when we don't get hunger cues. And it regulates all of like our sensory pieces so that when we take in information or we experience emotional pieces, we don't get too far one way or the other. So then you add in the piece of like for our neurodivergent friends, like we don't make enough dopamine internally. And so one of the things that we have to do in order to cope is create spaces of regulation around us and make sure that our environment is regulating us, because internally we can't regulate ourselves always. And so that's why it's so important, I think. And when you think about it, like with stimulation, when we go outside and it's super, super bright and we first reach for like those sunglasses, that sun like is very stimulating. I know that there's like even that subset of people, like the minute you step in the sun, you sneeze. And it's because like your body is literally responding to that sensory component. And the first thing that your brain thinks is like, oh, this is too much too fast. And like, it's a reset piece. Does that make sense?
Gosh, I didn't realize that was the thing that like other people experience. That happens to me all the time. Or I'm one of the ones that can like look at a light bulb and a sneeze and get like a sneeze out.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
It's so
It's
so
right. It's sensory. I mean, and that's the thing, like when you really start to look at it, like our senses tell us everything about our environment all the time, but we don't even pay attention to them because we're so used to not having to, because that's one of those like more early like developmental like skills that we think about. So then when we're not having to pay attention to it, because we have all of these like quote unquote higher level thinking pieces we have to do, like we miss it. And then we were like, oh, I don't understand how any of this is connected to each other.
yeah. Yeah, it's like when I go to bed in New York City, I'm lulled to sleep by the sounds of neighbors and shouting and sirens. But when I go to the lake house and I hear like one door creak or one tiny cricket, I'm like, wait, what is that? Because it's so quiet that it's like creepy. And I didn't even realize that like I had gotten used to all the sounds in the city. And it actually, you know, same thing with like lockdown. And when you went downtown, when everything was shut down, you're like, this is spooky as.
Yeah.
And I was going somewhere with this. Keep talking. It'll come back to my brain. It'll come back.
No, like, what part do you want me to keep talking on? Is there a part that was like good or a question, or are there any questions that like other people have asked or anything like that?
I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. Like, so here, let me throw in one other piece that might be actually really interesting for you, is that on the flip side, when people are overstimulated too much, it can also mess with our hunger cues. And sometimes people will think that that's a positive thing. They're like, oh, I'm not eating as much because like I'm stimulated in this way. But when we're overstimulated and we're not getting those hunger cues, we're also producing a lot of the stress hormone. And so, even if you're losing weight initially, or even if you're doing okay with that initially, it's actually not a long-term plan, because all you're doing is exposing yourself to more cortisol. And if we don't get that cortisol out of your body, it starts to become part of the cell makeup. And so that's where that part of like trauma coping and sensory pieces and somatic coping comes into play, is that all of it's connected. And if you're not eating, you're not getting those cues, you're also not getting the nutrition that you need to be able to actually function. And so when we go back to like that functioning piece, when we are overstimulated or understimulated, it's a really good sign of like how we are functioning as a person, and not like, oh my gosh, like they can't keep it together kind of functioning, but more of like, is this actually sustainable or is it not?
Yeah. Yeah. And then if it's not sustainable, the value, having the value of a support team and a village to lean on, because we get to that point where like, oh, everything's about to like come crashing down. Like, who can I turn to? Whether it's like a mental health professional or your PCP or a specialist or your neighbors or friends or loved ones that can help, unburden you or just give you some time. I remember what I was going to say. The way you were explaining serotonin to me, like it finally clicked in my head. And if I'm like comprehending it right, it sounds like serotonin manages like the switchboards. It's so much stuff in your body.
So the dopamine.
The dopamine, sorry.
Yeah. So I think that that's really, it manages a lot of those pieces. And so like, that's the biggest part of like, if somebody loses or doesn't have enough dopamine, that all of your regulation can come like off the rails. I mean, we even, and let me like say too, like some of this is just like my very special interest. And so some of it is I'm just like reading tons and tons of research, but I am not like a neuropsychologist. So also like there's pieces there that they would definitely be able to explain more, and eloquently, but with just reading like the amount of data, like we're seeing connections now with some of the newest research coming out, with thyroid function, with like all of these weird pieces. And then you add into the fact that like for women, one of the reasons that people thought of ADHD as a childhood disorder is because they only studied it in men. And so for men, it did look like they outgrew those symptoms because dopamine and testosterone have a more like mutually beneficial relationship, whereas estrogen and dopamine don't always play nice together. And so one of the things that we've really seen in disparity of healthcare is that so many women with these symptoms and struggling with some of these things, but not having a name for it or being labeled anxiety or depression or like all of these other pieces, because we just had looked at what it looked like in men. And so our genetic makeup and the way that our hormones interact also impacts how we synthesize dopamine and how it gets processed through our body. But too, like even diet components and things like that, we have to have high protein in order to make dopamine. And so that's something that is also like a little bit of a shift for people to be thinking about, is that one of the first things, even if you're on medication for ADHD or like you have kids that are, or things like that, one of the first things they'll tell you is like, make sure that you're increasing your protein because we have to have enough protein in our diets in order to like actually make that molecule.
That's really fascinating. Even so maybe it's a possibility that whenever people do start exercising more and their trainers are like, drink more protein, bro, that they are consuming more protein and actually doing themselves a favor and aiding this, but they didn't even know it. So it's like another, not necessarily like this, like the exercise wasn't necessarily the reason why your emotional state is improving or changing, but because you started doing that, it like also happened to happen. That was like a really bad, I think that was a really bad way to like have that sentence come out of my mouth.
No, but I know like what you're saying, like nutrition plays just as much of a role, and not like in just choosing to eat things that are low fat or things like that, but in choosing to like give your body the actual nutrition that it needs. And like there's a lot of really amazing like functional medicine pieces that are going into place right now for this. And I would even say too, I would recommend that people, if you like, y'all have access to things in New York that like we do not have access to in the sticks of Ohio. But what I would say is like functional medicine and looking at nutrition and looking at the way that your body processes things is so smart. And like, obviously it's not a be all end all type thing, but it is a huge component of wellness.
Mm-hmm. A big piece to the puzzle. And that's why I found it important to, shameless plug here, introduce an actual holistic nutritionist into my coaching program, because I stay in my lane as a trainer, and I know how valuable nutrition is to supporting, an exercise program regimen and a healthy lifestyle, but I don't have all of the answers. So I wanted to give women this opportunity to work one-on-one with an actual nutritionist who can take a look at their life, their stage of life, if they're postpartum, if they're premenopausal, postmenopausal, and be like, this is what we can focus on to maximize your success in this program and in your life. I think one thing that came up a lot as you were talking for me was two of my big triggers for sensory overload. One of them came up when I was pregnant in this apartment, and I was bumping into things all the time. And I felt so bad for Chris, because I was just flipping out on him all the time. Like, there's so much stuff in this house. And I was just purging and throwing things out. And I recognized that, like, when I have to like scooch and move and adjust myself just to get like to the other side of the room, it overstimulates me. So I worked on clearing as much out and creating as many straight lines as possible. And obviously having the kid and not having a giant belly was helpful as well. But it happens too for me in Costco. If there's too many people in Costco, I have to leave. Or like, I will not go on the weekends. I will not go in the evenings, because if there's too many people that I have to navigate around, similar with traffic, and I guess with my road rage, just like verbal road rage. I'm not actually like a bad driver, but feeling like there's so much stuff to have to pay attention to at once, and then like the bad crazy drivers come in, or people are double parked, and like I get so overloaded with like stuff I have to be aware of at one given time. I actually recognized when I decided to start taking medication for my mental health issues, one of the biggest red flags for me was that I didn't feel like I was aware of everything when I was driving. And like in New York City, like anywhere that's bad, but in New York City, you have to be so aware of the people crossing the street, the cars blowing red lights, just so much stuff. And I realized that I was like processing things very slowly. If anyone's ever like, I don't know how to explain it, but like everything was just happening so slowly that I was like, okay, something is really, really, really wrong on a chemical level, and I need to have this addressed. So yeah, I was just like, it was really interesting, and I absolutely love this conversation because of how women really are screwed with the way that research has been done. And if you aren't aware of it, like over the years when research has done, they chose men because they had less variables, right? Women have so many more hormonal variables, and like times in their cycle, they had so many more things that was so hard to measure consistently across the board, that they were just like, let's just do guys. Or only the studies that are around women are only with like particular issues with pregnancy, right? Because they can be like, okay, you're at this phase in your trimester, and we're measuring this, likelihood of gestational diabetes, or like the research is so hyper focused around very particular parts of women's lives. But as we go on about our normal life, there's so much happening, and we just think like, oh, it's my metabolism, oh, it's my thyroid, oh, I just suck at sticking with a program. But people like you who are digging deep and doing the research and helping us understand better that there are so many things at play, and not just that there's a lot of things at play, but there are things we can do about it that are small. So after my little soapbox moment, what would be one first step that you would recommend for anyone listening to take after getting all of this information besides listening again?
Yeah. I guess like my first thought is like, I will absolutely send over like the PDF, and like it's written for like families and for little kiddos, but I do think that it's a really good jumping off point of being aware of how much our environment impacts us, but also like ways that we can end up shifting things for our environment, even down to like what clothing we wear on days that we have more stress, to what kind of lighting that we have in our spaces when we have more stress, or like if we're understimulated, like what we need to do to raise that back up. But just it's a different intentional way of trying to stay connected with your body. Meditation has not worked for my brain. I've never been able to like clear out the room and have like the one purple chair there or something. Like I can't do that. But I do think like now paying attention very much to like sensory pieces allows for me to be more connected with my body. And then I can actually know like, what is it that you're really craving right now? What is it that you really need right now from a sensory perspective? And I would say that like that helps me to be able to be more in tune and be more intentional about things. And obviously we can't change all the things, but I would also say that like just what I know in regards to cortisol and trauma and the way that our body responds to crisis is that if we get to a certain point, to a certain threshold, and we switch over to like that fight or flight survival mode, then our body doesn't even function at like its healthiest level in regard to like doing any of the things. And so just kind of combining those pieces and thinking about like somatic coping in regards to how that helps you to have motivation, how that helps you to stay on track, how that helps you to get to meet what goals you need, but then also that like if there's other parts of your life that aren't functioning properly, like whether it's the mound of laundry that you just can't get to or whatever, it doesn't matter. I think like finding the spaces to function the way that you need to. I think that one of the things that has been the most beneficial during this whole COVID piece to me is realizing like, you don't actually just have to do what you think you're supposed to do. You have to figure out how to do your life in the best way possible for you, whatever that looks like, even if that looks strange to other people, because like it's about functioning and being well and not thinking about what other people need you to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll end this on a thought that I got from my yoga experience when I was in India, and someone was explaining, we're talking about knowledge, right? And that we, perceive the world based on what we know. There's plenty that we don't know, but that's how we perceive our world. So knowledge isn't necessarily power, but knowledge is freedom. Because once we have more knowledge and more understanding of how our body works and how we respond to things, we have the freedom to make choices and to adjust it so that we can live a better lives and feel empowered to make those changes ourselves. So thank you, cousin. I love you so much. I appreciate your time. Emily is a mom in the group, and I believe is happy if you had a question and tagged her. If anyone who's watching is interested in this PDF, just comment in the conversation and I will get it right to you, but I will also have it posted right in the group so you can start working on this for yourself or for your family. So until next time, everyone, again, thank you, Emily. Stay strong, stay hydrated, caffeinated, and I will see you all in the group. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.